Welcome back to Echo Ridge and another episode here in our farm series. Today, we're going to be making an arboretum. That's what the Google's telling me. So I know we have places like this where we have a couple of arbor trees. We have some meal lice over by our Dracos. Is that really it? Seriously? That's the only plants that we have? I guess we have a thimbleweed over here. Oh no, we also have mushrooms. Either way, I thought it would be cool and really in keeping with the series to have a giant location dedicated to nothing but plants and trees. There, of course, is a couple of problems with this idea in the fact that all of these plants, they sort of like different materials and they like different environments. For instance, the pitcher pepper plant. It enjoys a balmy 35 to 85 degrees and takes in phosphorite and polluted water. The bristle blossom, on the other hand, likes it a little chillier at 5 to 30 degrees and only requires water. Whereas something like the sleet wheat likes it even colder at minus 55 to 5C and requires dirt and water. So then I started thinking, well, what if we had sectioned off areas of the Arboretum and they were all independently climate controlled and environment controlled? So then I started looking at location, and I'd already been in the process of sort of digging out this area, but quite frankly, all of this stuff is gonna fall everywhere. It's okay when stuff falls over here, we have a system in place where this pump takes anything over. Whereas over here, it would make a much larger mess. We did do a couple of things, like extending the floor to make sure errant liquids don't end up in our tanks, making this mesh tile so the liquids don't pool here and then fall in. We did the same here with our nice crude oil liquid lock. Again, if liquids fall, they'll then fall this way past the liquid lock. And then on this side, like we said, it's good if we have all the liquids here. But to be honest, we also have the hermit up here, and like I said, the mess. Whereas down here, well, everything's just gonna fall down here anyways. There's nothing you can really make a mess of. Plus, I really need to get to taming these cool steam vents because, well, it's cycle 1271. Apparently I've been sitting on my thumbs for, I don't know, 60 hours. So that's what we got today. We're going to build an arboretum, except Google tells me most arboretums are just for trees. So let me know in the comments below if you've got another better name. I really do enjoy reading all your suggestions. And we're going to be taming both these cool steam vents. But that gets me thinking, should I just do an independent tamer for each vent? Or since they're so close together, should I do a sort of one-off system? I don't know. I suppose to start off with, we just need to do a whole lot of digging. And this vent here is dormant, so I don't mind just chopping right through. We'll go down and then back up. And then just slide all the way over. And then rinse and repeat. Almost there with the scaffolding, which is one of the reasons why the 7-tile method works so well, because after you get the scaffolding in, it's actually pretty difficult for the dupes to get stuck. Let's just do one of these numbers, shall we? Yay! Oh, and some of this, of course. Make sure we have our scaffolding in place here. I can also deconstruct all of that nonsense. And then there was a volcano under here. Oh, it's another cool slush geyser. Hold on. If they were a little bit closer, I'd just put all 3 of them inside of one box. And the cool slush geyser, I would think, would have enough cool thermals to tame both of them. We'll get in the business of taming this thing today, too. I'm just looking around to make sure there was no other volcanoes or anything else that I should not be opening up. And it doesn't look like it is, so that means it's montage time. And the montage is canceled because Matthew Campbell is making me look like a liar and has gotten themselves stuck. To fix this, we will just accelerate all of that. They'll be fine. They have plenty of oxygen in their suit. And that is about it. Not too shabby. We still have some cleaning up to do around here, but it'll be okay. Now, one concern I did have and that you may have noticed at any one time, I only saw 4 or 5 dupes digging at once. And once again, I think the problem stems from a lack of Atmos suits. You can see that we have, 6 sitting here? It's not a big help, but 6 more dupes out and about ends up being a lot of duplicate labor. And you can see that the priority was set on 6 on all of them, but every once in a while I'm having to do a manual deliver the suit, and it doesn't seem to be due to a lack of oxygen, it just seems to be a lack of suits. I'm going to keep an eye on it. I did notice that this set could use some more oxygen, so I did tie in this line so that this line gets shored up a little bit more, but I don't think that's the issue either because it's running pretty steady as well. But I also think it could just be due to a lack of duplicates. Yeah, we have 25 of them, but we have a lot of ranching tasks in and around the colony. And remember, I can't take other duplicates unless we find one that, at a minimum, has farming or ranching. I also need to extend our transit tube back down. Unfortunately, as we expected in the beginning of the game, this transit tube's only going to go so far because it runs smack dab into the middle of 2 geysers. But this won't be too bad, I suppose. I could probably also help the case by putting a nice fire pole down here, just like we have this one on the right-hand side as well. We have 62 tons of cobalt, so this will do the trick just fine. But since we have these geysers here in the way, we have an oil reservoir here, which, to be quite honest, we're never going to tame. We seem to be doing just fine on oil. But I'm thinking maybe the Arboretum is going to fall somewhere around here. Oh yes, it's going to be so large. Now when I'm looking at the initial design, I'm taking a look at what plants can share a room. For instance, the bog buckets can go from 10 to 30 degrees and require polluted water, as does the arbor trees, which can go from 15 to 40. So the arbor trees and the bog buckets can definitely share a room. Likewise, a lot of the regular plants can too, such as the blissburst, the bluffbriar, and the buddybud. But then you have plants like the balm lilies that not only require chlorine, but also like it a little warm. Well, the balm lilies share that characteristic with the wonderful Dacia salt vine, which also can take it a little warm and also like to be in chlorine gas. The pigeon pepper plant likes it a little warm, also requires polluted water, so they could probably share a room with the bog buckets and the arbor trees as well. The point I'm trying to get at is, yeah, we're going to need a bunch of different levels, but a lot of the plants can share the same room. So in that, guys, I think I'm just going to make a bunch of levels and expand as needed. Because a lot of those plants, well, we don't even have quite yet. I also don't think I have to worry too much about temperature leakage, although it would be really handy to use transit tube access to get in and out. That way I could completely seal this off from the outside environment. Now, using the transit tube for access points in and out of someplace does represent risk, because if you run out of power to the transit tube, well, the dupe's not going to be able to get in, and more importantly, they won't be able to get out either. But I also think it just sort of has a nice feeling to it. So I'm thinking an access corridor right about here. We'll definitely put a transit tube access point, and that way the dupes can get in and out pretty easily, except I'm going to have to drop it by 1, aren't I? I've always been irritated by the fact that you have to get rid of a ladder and a pole in order to bring the transit tube around. I really wish these were able to be background buildings, and it looks like I still needed to go higher because the tubes need to have their nice 90-degree bend, and then this point right here is going to be the actual transit tube crossing. I'm also going to need an area where I can add a bunch of thermal aqua tuners as the sort of environmental control system. Now, in doing this, I've already decided I'm not going to make a bunch of one-off systems like this. Oh, by the way, in a hilarious turn of events, these 2 pipes have cracked again. And as a matter of fact, our cooling loop isn't moving at all. I think one way to sort of fix this whole solution... Oh, it's because I did this stupidity. Oops. Never mind, disregard, it was my fault after all. At least in this case. But what I plan on doing is making one continuous shaft filled with thermal aqua tuners and just have all that heat head up here to maybe 2 steam turbines? I think 2 would be able to deal with it. We're also going to need a whole mess of power transformers to be able to deal with all of this. because we're going to be running the thermal aqua tuners, not to mention we're probably going to need some heaters in some of them as well. And then because we want to thermally isolate each level, we're going to have a bunch of insulated tile levels, something like this. Oh, this construction project is going to take a lot longer than I originally thought, but that's what we're here for. Bigger projects just means more content for you, possibly less sanity for me. And then to make it even, Steven, we're going to chop the bottom 2 tiles off. Now, another question I had is, do I just make this area here a vacuum and maybe put little drop-offs at each point and then utilize the transit tube crossing so they can get in and out? Or do I just have tiny little liquid locks? I think the power requirements for adding, I don't know, 10 more transit tube access points is probably a little stifling. So I think we'll just add liquid locks to each one. Except, is there a way we can make that look a little better? That'd be great. Thanks. And yes, because we're not double liquid locking every single side, there will be some temperature leakage through each point, but I don't think that's a big deal at all. We're also not going to finish these off completely until we get this whole thing vacuumed out. And in order to do that, I need to seal this place up, which means I need some power. And after a quick modification of the setup, we now have a transformer connected to the main power spine for every single level. And with our transit tube access point powered, I think we can seal this whole thing up. And construction's going okay. It's going to take forever to get it vacuumed out, but that's not a big deal. We're just going to put down, let's say, 8 gas pumps. I'm also going to have to seal all this place up as well. We're going to end up having one of the steam ports blocked, which shouldn't be too big of a deal. And I know everybody's sort of worried that this is not going to be enough cooling potential, but my theory is that these thermal aqua tuners are not going to have to work very hard once this thing is in place, because once you get an area to, say, 35 degrees, not much is coming in that area for that thermal aqua tuner to need to keep it at 35 degrees or -5. I was off on my count. We're only using 6 gas pumps, but again, I'm not too worried about it. This should work just fine. We are falling really behind on some of these construction projects though. Oh, I'm gonna need a liquid lock to get in here too. Ooh, wait a minute. Unless I just vacuum it out from this side, and then I'll seal it back up when we're done. I think that's a big brain boov move. In the meantime, I've also started putting in this system here. I'm going to try using one thermal aqua tuner for both cool steam vents. Not the greatest idea I've ever had, but we're going to do it anyways. I'm also trying to wait for this cool steam vent to go dormant in 16 cycles before I crack it back open. I also need to add a hydro sensor and start building some more of these pipes in. But this one over here, we're going to be able to do nice and fresh. We will also be putting in a bunch of temperature shift plates. Made out of igneous rock is just fine. And because I don't want the comments to yell at me for not using any drywall, we're also going to put some drywall in and around the area. And before you even ask, no, we are not drywalling this whole thing right now. This episode's already going to take a very long time to record. We can't drywall it. Maybe later. Because we are so far behind on duplicate labor, we're going to desperately look inside the printing pod again. And what are you connected to? Okay, there's no power wire there. Just making sure. There is this Abe here that has farming, but they're also a loud sleeper and they're a Luddite. If they're one or the other, I would have picked up Abe with the quickness, but both of them, we'll take some barbecue. Now, normally I like to vacuum out the cool steam vents, and that way this whole area is a vacuum, but I'm gonna do a different method of vacuuming it out, which means, once again, I'm gonna need some sort of lock. Now, I'm thinking that if I do something like this, and then drop a little bead of something, this will become sealed off. So all I'm gonna need is a little bottle emptier, and then of course, this area is gonna need to be vacuumed out too. This area over here is doing decent. We're left with a bunch of chlorine gas and some carbon dioxide. We're down to the hundreds of grams, so we're making some headway. More times 10 speed for me. Some of you may have noticed that this cool slush geyser has been analyzed and is just sitting out in the open. I am getting ready to seal it back up, but to be quite honest, I mean, we could use some cooler thermals down here for a little while anyways, so I'm not in a big old hurry. But all we're going to be doing is taking that line and plugging it right into one of the ingest lines here. Probably something like this. Oh yeah, we have plumbing all over the place here. I can actually plug this line in here too. This one's already got an ingest over here, and that'll be the cool steam vents taken care of. And just like that, our other side project is complete on this side, so we can get rid of the gas pump and everything here. And I think this side is pretty much done. All we'll have to do is seal it up. And notice that I put the little bead lock on the outside. That way when I do seal it up, no oil is going to get in here. We're going to set this hydro sensor on above 500. So this liquid pump will only start pumping once there's above 500 kilos worth of water in here. And you might be wondering as well, Echo, you're already cooling all of the ingest here. Well, the reason we still have to cool the cool steam vents is so you don't end up with a situation like this where it's nothing but steam. You have to provide some cooling for it. And instead of waiting for this one, I decided, well, it just makes sense to sort of break in there now, and as long as the steam doesn't mess up my bead lock, we'll be okay. Oh, that bead lock is gonna fail, isn't it? So far, it's holding strong, although there's only 46 grams left. We don't have much work to do in here. It'll be okay. And really quick, once I've got all the steam condensed, I'm going to get the rest of the gases out there. We never properly tamed this one, so there is some carbon dioxide in here. So as long as we can do this before the next eruption cycle, we're not going to be gobbling up a bunch of steam, which is not going to happen because that's in 52 seconds. So we'll get it next time. And one of our next pods actually had a Travaldo that we can grab. They're a supplying rancher, and the only negative is that they're a pacifist, which might have some moral or ethical complications here on the ranch, but Travaldo's gonna do fine. Or should I say, Mike. I'm not 100% sure if Mike is trying to do the trademark symbol or if it's just Mike TM, but I think Mike the trademark seems kinda good. Welcome to the colony, duplicate number 26. Mike trademark? We did manage to vacuum this out. All that's left is steam. The oil bead lock did fail thanks to the steam, but it was replaced with a water bead lock. Win-win. Now over here in our steam turbine bath, I'm going to use the 3-layer system. I've long ago abandoned the 3-layer system for a wonderful 2-layer system here, but I want to cross one of the theories off, and that's that it's being caused by some weird interaction of it only being 2 layers high. The other thing that I started doing recently that I had not been doing before is adding these buffer tanks so that there's never a gap in our coolant line, with the aim being that it's a thermal equalizer because all those blobs get mixed in with 4 tons of, in this case, 21 degree polluted water. So I am going to try a buffer tank here, but I'm going to have it 3 tiles high. Now remember, when you're doing the 3-tile system, you have to sort the liquids by weight. Otherwise you're going to end up with entirely too much liquid in here. So thinking that through, I think we're going to start with brine, which is heavier than salt water, then salt water, and then standard water. I also need to fill up the coolant loop, which will not be a problem because we have a beautiful line sitting right here filled with polluted water. We will bridge that on, and then I will also build the platform for the buffer tank. Ah, glorious buffer tank. Except I'd rather have it right before or right after it exits here, so I'm going to move this, change my mind once again, and put it here instead. That way, all the liquids that it's being averaged with are already cool. So if the steam turbine does manage to fall behind because the steam's getting really hot, the buffer tank will help compensate for it. And since we're doing that, we also need to make sure the thermal opportuner does not turn on, so we'll set it to above 9725.8. We've got 1 strong layer of brine, so the next going in is going to be the salt water, and if my theory is correct, the salt water will just layer right here on top. With this much brine, we've already put enough liquids in it to have enough steam pressure for the thermal aqua tuner, so it'll just be just a little bit of salt water. And my memory was correct, the salt water is lighter than the brine. An easy way to remember that is the brine has a higher salt content, which in effect makes it heavier. Now we're just going to put a thin layer of water right on top. And there we have it. 3 layers of liquid. So I don't have to worry about there being any gases in here when we seal it up. I do need to make sure this is connected here. We also have the heavy watt conductive wire coming from all the way over here so that we're taking all that steam turbine power and dumping it onto the grid. And in order to get a little bit extra inside the buffer tank, I need to separate it so that this line will just start dumping into the buffer tank and not the other way, because otherwise the bridge is not going to let any more onto the line. And I will say that is plenty full enough, so now we will stop this bridge, let the buffer tank empty some of it onto here, seal up the thermal aqua tuner, and then this is done. And it should work. Should. And the reason why I'm saying it's going to work is not because it's necessarily going to get the water down to a perfect temp that we'd want. Rather, we just need it down to the point where it condenses. And with the steam turbine in place, we can turn this on. We'll say 25 degrees to be optimistic, which if you've never seen a steam vent tamer, the reason why we do it this way is we want this water to be sitting at 25 degrees, which means these temperature shift plates will also be 25 degrees. So any of the steam that comes out of the steam vent instantly touches the temperature shift plate and condenses right into water. This vent's activity period is not for another 21 cycles, whereas this one is going dormant in 5 cycles. So we're going to have plenty of time for the system to be able to catch up before the vents eventually sync up and they're active at the same exact time. Meanwhile, we are still waiting for a vacuumed out room. I'll be back. Patience is starting to get the best of me, so we are adding more pumps. I don't know if this is going to make the process go any quicker. Theoretically, it should. And I've also put in the thermal aqua tuner that's going to keep both the steam turbines cool and this first room. This first room is going to be a little bit different than the rest because it's not going to be growing crops for food or anything like that. Rather, it's going to have all of our wonderful flowers. I'm thinking maybe 3 of each type should satisfy the masses. Or maybe we put them in rooms separate. This will give us enough for 5, so it'll be a good start. Now, I understand building a vacuum in real life is pretty difficult. In fact, we've had this conversation during some of my live streams with some pretty intelligent people that say achieving a true vacuum is actually impossible. If that sort of conversation interests you, and well, to be honest, even if it doesn't, because we talk about all sorts of stuff over there, I stream a variety of games and am live quite often during the week. You should come on over sometime and check out the Twitch channel. We even have cookies and lemonade. Now it says it's a vacuum, but we can clearly still see some gases, which means I might have to put some other pumps in there because it doesn't look like it's doing the thing where it's erasing. Oh, no, it is. It's just starting from the top down. There goes the chlorine, and then the carbon dioxide is following suit as well. Voila! Now all we have to do to protect this whole thing is start adding the liquid locks. There's something about a vacuum in this game that just is so satisfying. Now in designing the liquid lock itself, I've decided on crude oil for the simple reason that it can get cold enough and hot enough for all of our needs. And because we're keeping this center shaft as a vacuum, we don't have to worry about the thermals that I had mentioned a little earlier. And I was even looking at putting a conduction panel in to keep the transit tube access point cool, but it doesn't look like it generates any heat. And if it doesn't generate any heat, well, it's never going to overheat. And for now, I think we're going to leave this bottom area open, and that way we have access to this room that is going to be eventually nothing but steam. Now, the good question is, how do I turn this into a steam bath, even though the aqua tuner is sitting way up here? And truth be told, I should have started with one aqua tuner down here and a whole bunch of temperature shift plates. But if we can at least correct one of those things by starting the long process of putting in way too many temperature shift plates, there we go. The only issue here is I don't want to put a temperature shift plate next to the insulated tiles because then the temperature shift plate's actually injecting heat into it, which is not necessarily what we want, but I don't have another way of connecting these two areas, so I think I'm gonna do it anyways, even though it doesn't line up well at all. In the same fashion, I did the same thing here, which was probably not smart. I could have kept the drywall up here for a little bit more thermal efficiency, which, by the way, so far this thermo aqua tuner has not broken anything, even though it's using a buffer tank, and the bridge is still sitting above it. And you'll notice it just now turned off. In the past 5 cycles, it was running 100% of the time. Now we're going to enable auto bottle and add some crude oil to these liquid locks all the way down. And I'm definitely not going to forget about this and make a huge mess. I've moved the entrance point while the duplicants are busy finishing the temperature shift plate, and that way I can start filling this area with water. The way I see it, this area is 504 tiles large, not counting the big natural gas geyser in the middle, which tells me if I added 500 kilos worth of water, every tile would have 1 kilo worth of steam once we evaporate it. Well, I want every tile to have at least 20 kilos, which means I need about 10,000 kilos worth of water. Which sounds like a lot, but if we just fill it up to this point, that'll still be plenty. And lucky for us, we have a nice water ingest point right here, so we're just going to start dumping water in. Now to create the steam, I'm putting a thermo aqua tuner down here for what's eventually going to be our sleet wheat farm, and it might also dual purpose as our nosh bean farm, because the nosh sprout likes it nice and cold as well, so if we kept it around -5, we'd be fine. But they have to be in separate rooms because, well, the nosh sprout only likes carbon dioxide. Of course, the sleet wheat can grow in carbon dioxide too, so maybe we'll dual purpose this room here. And if I'm going to be feeding those using liquid pipes, I probably need to raise this pipe here. So we'll do something like this, get rid of this. And that way, when we put hydroponic farms down here, we'll be able to feed the nosh sprouts ethanol and the sleet wheats water. Not that we have either of those two plants yet, but that's besides the point. And I know a perfect way to let some carbon dioxide in. If the duplicants ever hurry up and build my liquid locks. Our next pod came with a great max with supplying, digging, and of course farming. They're also gourmet, germ resistant, and their only negative is irritable bowel, which that's not ever a big deal in my book. Welcome to duplicant number 27, elongated bread. We've got some progress here. Our crude oil lock on the first room is done, which means it's ready for its atmosphere. Now for our flowers, I think we're just going to use a regular oxygen atmosphere, and lucky for us, I know we have plenty of oxygen canisters laying around, because what happens when a suit gets worn out, any oxygen that's left in it as it heads off to be repaired gets dumped off into a little bottle here, and that's the reason we have 8.2 tons sitting in a bottle. So now all I have to do is select breathable atmosphere and oxygen, and they will kindly go get us a nice bottle. Now for this first room, we're just going to go with an even 25 degrees because all the plants are good with 25. Now I know this is not all of them. We still have the sporkid, the joya seeds, but there's nothing to say we can't put a sporkid down here to give all of our sleet wheat and nosh beans some zombie spores. That'll be a good time. Another thing we have to do is load up this loop, even though it doesn't have a great cooling system quite yet. It's got a little bit of water that'll keep the thermo aqua tuner cool, but that won't be long. And because of this cool slush geyser, I do have another source of polluted water sitting right here, and I will just bridge that on as normal and make sure the thermo aqua tuner does not turn on quite yet. And I know I said I wasn't, but I figured maybe we should wallpaper the rooms as we go. We're just not going to do the whole thing. I think we're going to start with a nice aqua plaid print. We've got 2 kilos worth of oxygen pressure in here, so I think that's plenty of oxygen. So we will deconstruct this. We'll move our wonderful oxygen bucket all the way back over here. And you'll notice some of the flowers are already saying that it's too hot in here. We'll be able to fix that. But this polluted water came in nice and chill. So without even turning the thermo aqua tuner on, it'll eventually cool this area down. We are ready to start doing some super chilling down here to hopefully turn this into some steam. We're just waiting for the rest of the liquid locks. In fact, this one is done here. This one is done here. I'm trying to put at least 150 kilos in each tile. This one went over a little bit, no big deal. And all the liquid locks are now complete, which means I really need to seal this place up. But in order to do that, I need to get more thermo aqua tuners in there. And I'm just going to assume I'm going to be able to use 1 thermo aqua tuner for every 2 rooms. That seems like a decent plan, even though I don't think it's going to take that much. So give me a second while I build my 4,000th aqua tuner setup. Because the key is, if I have them built, I can seal this whole place off and not have to worry about it. Then whenever I'm ready, I load up some coolant and they're ready to go. And I'm sure I'm not going to make a single mistake in the execution of any of this to where I'll eventually have to break back in here. It's going to be fine. No chaos whatsoever. even though I'm sure some of you have already seen a mistake that I've made. Throw some power in here. Very nice. And our dupes are already starting to stall in their commands, and we only have 27 of them. I'm not 100% blaming the Pacu, but it's probably their fault. I'm also going to grab some carbon dioxide from down here. This won't take long at all. I'll use a regular gas vent, so we only put 2 kilos worth of carbon dioxide pressure. I'm sure we'll get a little bit of polluted oxygen. It's not a big deal. Don't at me. Stay away, polluted oxygen. Stay away. No, no, no. Oh, there it is. There it is. The polluted oxygen tile of shame. Now, right now, all we have for coolant is polluted water, which, if you remember, polluted water can go down to minus 20 degrees. So we're just going to have this set on -5. Let's double check to make sure all the aqua tuners are done. There's the plumbing. There's the automation. Here's the power. Very nice. Let's seal it up. And what I'm going to do to make sure this cooling loop keeps running is add a couple of space heaters. And with 3 space heaters, it ought to keep that thermal aqua tuner active enough to where it'll turn all of this into steam to where we have a nice, beautiful steam bath. Now remember, this is only temporary, because eventually we'll have enough heat in here, we won't have to artificially create it, but I need enough steam in here to be able to cool this room down. And in order to do that, this aqua tuner needs to be in an atmosphere. Granted, carbon dioxide is not the best solution. The thermal aqua tuner has started to run about 15% per cycle, so it's going to take it a while. The water is up to 28 degrees, but you're going to have to wait till next time to see the result. I'm interested to hear what you think about this concept as we start filling it with more plants. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. As always, I appreciate your continued interest in this series. And until next time, much love, happy gaming, and I'll talk to you soon.